Hey TDA and welcome back to Dyson Sphere Program. Today I am going to continue my one planet challenge run, where I'm basically trying to farm the Dark Fog, get all my materials going, and complete the game without ever leaving my planet. However, since I hate it when content creators waste your time by kind of misleading you, I'm going to tell you up front, I actually decided to not continue the challenge after this episode. If you want to know why, then I suggest you watch this episode, because I will be going through that in detail, and I think it will become pretty obvious. And by the way, it has nothing to do with the actual difficulty of the challenge, but completely different reasons. Anyway, let's dive into it. So let me start by addressing a couple of things that came up in the comments on the previous two episodes. So first of all, people were asking why I didn't actually automate more stuff than I have. Basically, I didn't actually automate anything other than some of the base resources that you can mine from the initial planet. The reason for that is pretty simple. You do get a lot of resources. You can see the belt is nicely filling up, and you have a distribution of quite a few resources, but it's spread across so many different items that you don't actually get that many of these particular items that you might want. Some of the items you get a pretty decent amount of compared to what you actually need, but for example things like copper, or what's another thing? For example, the what are these called? Combustible units. You get a fair amount, but nowhere near enough to produce whatever you want to do. So if you go spread it around too much, you'll just see your buildings not do anything anymore whatsoever. One exception is, and that was actually suggested in the comments as well, is to automate the production of the turrets, the base turrets, because these take resources that are fairly common. You get a lot of, you can actually produce them yourself on the planet as well. So automating this makes perfect sense. But honestly, I just dump this with several stacks of each every now and then, and that produces like 100 turrets. It barely takes any work, so I was just lazy and did not actually automate that at all. One thing that I did actually pretty quickly start to actually automate was the production of some of the more oil-based recipes. Mostly because my oil reserves were filling up quite nicely, and I needed to do something with that oil. But oil actually doesn't actually drop from the Dark Fog at all. You do get things like plastic and graphene, so you don't actually need to make everything, but you might as well make some of the basics, especially since organic crystals actually do not drop from the Dark Fog at all. No idea why that is, but it doesn't drop. So yeah, I figured why not just make that by hand on the planet itself, considering we have all the resources to do so. Now, I also found that it is very important to keep beefing up your defenses and kind of spread them out a little bit more as well as you're expanding your base, because every now and then the Dark Fog will find very strange angles on coming into your base, especially if you start mining resources a little bit to the side of where you originally started. For some reason they will really like going like straight forward, especially this base over here likes to go like this, for example, and yeah, that goes right past my defense, so spreading it out a little bit more makes a lot of sense. On top of that, making sure you have energy-based defenses, like with these laser turrets, makes your life a lot easier, because you don't need to supply them with ammunition, they just need to work from energy. So, all in all, beefing up your defense is a very worthwhile thing to do, especially considering every time you research new technology, the enemy bases will start leveling up as well. So these things, the waves won't actually get bigger, it's maximized to 180 units, but the units in those waves becoming stronger and stronger. Now, all in all, doing this challenge is pretty straightforward. You just stock up your defenses, keep defending, look every now and then at the very menacing dark hives that we have in the sky. Look at all those ships around that. I definitely don't want to get anywhere close to that. And you keep farming. I'm actually working on purple science at this point, which is very straightforward because you don't actually need yellow science to do this. So, getting to the like mid to late game-ish, not quite late game yet, but it's definitely just doing the same thing over and over again, collecting the resources. Now, in order to speed things up, you do want to continuously farm the Dark Fog, so rather than just having these waves come in one by one, which do actually come at a pretty high rate, so you get a lot of resources from that. You can actually speed things up by kind of poking the bear, getting your defenses close to that, and then have a continuous flow of Dark Fog coming into your base. However, before you do that, I recommend that you set up your planetary defenses. And of course, by planetary defenses, I mean the planetary shield generators. Now, these things are actually pretty cool. They put a shield over your planet and make sure that whenever you get shot at from space, those things actually don't hurt your planet, assuming you have enough power. Which brings me to the second point. You don't actually need to automate this because you only need like a handful of these, but these things draw a massive amount of power. So make sure you build them early because they need to charge up, but also make sure you supply them with plenty of power because you don't want your base defenses running out of power while you're being attacked from space, or vice versa, your shield actually running out of power because you didn't charge it enough. So speaking of power, of course you can do a lot of wind turbines and stuff like that, but I actually decided to go with coal-based power and specifically making combustible units and then putting those in these thermal power plants, which is a pretty efficient way of powering your planet. These things give a decent amount of power by themselves, and all in all, it's a pretty straightforward way. You have plenty of coal on your starting planet in order to fuel these for a very long time, so there's no real fear of running out anytime soon. However, there is an alternative way to do this as well. Because remember these energy shards that you get pretty much from the first wave in the hard mode? These can actually be put into the thermal power plant as well. The downside is they actually burn really fast, as you can tell. So that means that even though you get a fair amount of these things dropping from the dark fog, you will be burning them faster, at least if you use them in any significant way. You will be burning them faster than you get them, so you can't really rely on this as a source of power. The shield generators themselves actually look really cool. At least I even think the building itself looks cool even when it's just charging. Again, remember that you do need to actually charge these, so what I actually recommend is building them one by one, making sure that the first one is up to the normal level in terms of charging before you build the second one, unless for some reason you have a massive amount of power to spare. Remember that if you go to the planet mode and you tick the box, you can actually see the coverage of your planetary shield, which you can't really see right now, but hold on. Once it is powered, you can actually see the shield range, and as you can see, one shield actually covers a pretty massive portion of the planet. So definitely don't overdo this. Don't build like tens of these very close together, but spread them out. I think you can probably cover a base the size I have right here. If I maybe place one down here, one down here. Even with just two more, I think I can cover like 90% of my base. Now the problem becomes whether or not you want to actually include things like these mining facilities as well on the outliers of my planet. The answer is you probably do, because these things will be taken out every time you get attacked from from space. So, like with a handful of these planetary shields, you should be able to cover pretty much everything. Look at them going through the meat grinder. It's really satisfying to see all of this stuff die. Now, if you want to speed up your resource collection a little bit, all you need to do is move up your turret line close to the enemy base, and as you can see, you will get a non-stop attack. Whenever you see the assembling thing is basically when you have enough threat, but you actually don't have enough ships in the base already. That just means they're continuously attacking you. Now, depending on how far you set up away from the base, this might every now and then stop. I'll actually move a little bit away because I'm not sure how overbearing the sound is. But the basic idea is that this will get you a massive amount of incoming resources, because all of these bases will be collecting this. And of course that gives you a pretty decent amount of stuff coming in. Now this won't just be base resources, but even more complex stuff like turbines and graphene and things like that. Now the more research you do, the more complicated things will get. So for example, you can see I'm actually getting broadband as well as raw drops from the dark fog without any crafting needed whatsoever. The problem with non-stop farming the dark fog is this will actually trigger the dark hives to attack as well. They won't actually attack you if you leave the bases on your planet alone, but once you do, as you can see, and we should probably go to the planetary mode now, you will get a wave of vessels incoming, and those will be 15 vessels on the first run. That's actually a lot more than you get on the normal mode, of course, but these vessels are actually pretty strong as well, so if you do not have planetary shields, your base will be destroyed, even if you have plenty of rocket launchers and things like that. Trust me, I found that out the hard way. However, if you do have a shield up and running, the vessels become kind of a non-issue. As you can see, my rockets are working on taking the ships out, and the planetary shield is basically just sitting there defending against all these ships shooting at it. And as long as you have a decently powered shield, there's pretty much nothing the enemy fleet can do. Now, one massive problem with actually defending against non-stop waves is that you'll pretty quickly run out of ammo. At least I did. And so unless you set up like a massive ammunition factory, which will probably drain your planet from copper really quick, you're not really going to do much. Now, honestly, I wouldn't worry about that too much, because the initial ammunition is pretty bad, especially against higher level dark fog. So you want to rely mostly on the energy cannons, the laser cannons, like I just said before as well. The reason I still keep up this initial line of turrets is these are pretty cheap to make, and well, if they shoot at the enemy, it helps. As you can see, I still have a decent amount of ammunition coming in. The main reason I keep them intact is, as you can see, every now and then they get destroyed, and these things are a lot cheaper to make than the laser turret. So this is basically just a buffer line of defense against the enemy. Now, initially what I actually wanted to do is make something like storage units or something like that, and just put these in front, which you could do. I actually just never ended up doing it because you only lose like a couple of these things every now and then, and it didn't really turn out to be too much of an issue in terms of resources. Now, if you do want to start automating, and I actually did it after around getting to Purple Science, is doing it something like this. So you have this whole sorter setup anyway, you might as well just put some boxes on top of those and then the distributors on top of those. And then think very carefully about what you want these resources to be used on, because honestly you only want to have one, maybe two destinations for each resource. Otherwise you're just going to be spending a lot of effort just trying to rebalance where stuff is going. So what I decided to do is automate the turrets, automate the rockets, because I didn't really use all of that stuff for anything else, and then start automating things like belts and sorters. Now you actually don't need too many of these, so make sure you set the limits appropriately, but just having access to the Mark III stuff was very convenient. Now what I also did is I actually started to automate a couple of things related to science, like processors for the Purple Science and the titanium crystals for the Yellow Science, because I felt like I was getting a lot of the basic resources that you need to in order to make these things. Like for example, the components are not really used for anything else than making processors. You get plenty of these circuit boards, so you might as well put them to use and make some additional processors, even though you do get a fair amount of processors already. Now, of course, you don't necessarily need to make small builds. As you can see over here, for example, I put in 3 of these assemblers making broadband as well. But again, as you can see, I'm actually running low on some of these resources. In this case, what I'm running low on is actually the crystal silicon, which is not coming in at a high enough rate to satisfy these 3 assemblers. Now, I do get in a bunch of that every now and then it's flown in here, so I get the bonus units. But all in all, you can really feel the game slowing down at this point. And the interesting thing is that it's actually, despite getting more resources than my tier 3 belt can handle going into the sorter. Now, of course, an easy way to solve that issue is just building a secondary line of sorters, so that you can basically split the collection of your stuff between the 2 bases that I have over here. So basically this hive is mostly attacking the left side of my defenses, the other hive is mostly attacking the right side of my defenses. And by splitting those 2 in 2 different sorters, which are basically identical copies of each other, I'm just making sure that I can at least make sure all the resources are getting into my system. However, the main reason I did not want to continue this single planet challenge is, well, you're looking at it. Yellow Science. As you can see, I have the older colors of science in plenty of supply. You actually get a pretty decent drop rate, even for things like processors and broadband. But anything titanium related is so low in drop rate that you just don't get enough. And there's no way I can make more titanium on this planet, so I would actually have to go to a different planet to get more. That kind of would ruin the challenge. You do get a little bit of titanium, you also get titanium crystals, but nowhere near enough to get a decent amount of production going. Now, there's a fleet flying across my base. I do have the rocket launchers, they do have rockets, so I am not entirely sure why they're not being shot at, even though obviously they have been shot at. There we go. Okay, that's interesting. Anyway, yeah, but the production of Yellow Science is way too low to actually continue this challenge. It just stopped being fun. It's just everything grinds to a halt to the degree that everything just takes forever. Now, if you take into account that you need thousands of Yellow Science, especially near the end of this technology tree, in order to actually complete the game, or to get to mission completed, you would actually need 4,000 Yellow Science. All in all of that combined is it just stops being fun at some point. So can you do it? Definitely. But as the developers I think also mentioned in one of their updates, it's not really intended that you play the game like this. So yeah, it was a fun challenge to try and figure out how to do this, if it was even feasible. So the answer is yes, you can do it. It is feasible. It's just very, very slow and a long grind. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun blowing up spaceships, building turrets, building a base with this sorter thing going on, and kind of basically playing the game in a completely different way than what I've been doing the last few years. But like I said, once it stops being fun, it's time to move on and do something else. So, nonetheless, I hope this was useful. I'm also kind of wondering, and let me know in the comments what you think. Is there anything in particular that we've kind of missed so far? I feel like we've pretty much covered everything there is to say about the combat update, maybe. Not entirely sure. Maybe I'll get some more inspiration, but if you have any questions or suggestions in the comment, do let me know. And by the way, just because I just noticed this, we actually went past 10,000 subscribers to the channel, which is an amazing amount. So if you're one of those 10,000, thank you very much. If you're not, what are you waiting for? Sign up. And I do hope to continue to grow that amount in a lot in 2024. So I hope you enjoy the ride with me as well. If you're still here, you're awesome. And I do hope to catch you in the next one.